Korean face.
Chapter 5 Four Kingdoms of Korea and The Period of the Two Koreas.
5-1 Four Kingdoms of Korea, Goguryeo, Baekje, Silla, and Gaya.
The Four Kingdoms period, sometimes called the Multiple States period, is the earlier part of what is commonly called the Four Kingdoms period, following the fall of Gojoseon but before Goguryeo, Baekje, Silla, and Gaya fully developed into kingdoms. This time period saw numerous states spring up from the former territories of Gojoseon, which encompassed northern Korea and southern Manchuria. With the fall of Gojoseon, southern Korea entered the Samhan period. Located in the southern part of Korea, Samhan referred to the three confederacies of Min, Jinhan, and Baekje. The Four Kingdoms of Korea consisted of Goguryeo, Baekje, Silla, and Gaya. Silla and Baekje, Gaya controlled the southern half of the Korean Peninsula, maintaining the former Samhan territories, while Goguryeo controlled the northern half of the Korean Peninsula, Manchuria and the Liudong Peninsula, uniting Baekje, Baekje, Dongji, and other states in the former Gojoseon territories.
Goguryeo.
Goguryeo was a highly militaristic state. It was a powerful empire and one of the great powers in East Asia, reaching its zenith in the 5th century when its territories expanded to encompass most of Manchuria to the north, parts of Inner Mongolia to the west, parts of Russia to the east, and the Seoul region to the south. Goguryeo experienced a golden age under Gwanggyo the Great and his son Jangsu the Great, who among subdued Baekje and Silla, Gaya during their times, achieving a brief unification of the four kingdoms of Korea and becoming the most dominant power on the Korean Peninsula. In addition to contesting for control of the Korean Peninsula, Goguryeo had many military conflicts with various Chinese dynasties, most notably the Goguryeo Sunni Country War, in which Goguryeo defeated a huge force said to number over 1 million men. In 642, the powerful general Wang Jian led a coup and gained complete control over Goguryeo. In response, Emperor Tang Taizong of China led a campaign against Goguryeo, but was defeated and retreated. However, Wang Jian died of a natural cause in 666 and Goguryeo was thrown into chaos and weakened by a succession struggle among his sons and younger brother. The Tang-Silla alliance finally conquered Goguryeo in 668.
Baekje.
The southwestern Korean kingdom of Baekje was founded around modern-day Seoul by a Goguryeo prince, a son of the founder of Goguryeo. Baekje absorbed all of the main states and subjugated most of the western Korean peninsula to a centralized government. During the expansion of its territory, Baekje acquired Chinese culture and technology through maritime contacts with the southern dynasties. Baekje was a great maritime power. Its nautical skill, which made it the Phoenicia of East Asia, was instrumental in the dissemination of Buddhism throughout East Asia and continental culture to Japan.
Historic evidence suggests that Japanese culture, art, and language were influenced by the kingdom of Baekje and Korea itself. Baekje also played an important role in transmitting advanced Chinese culture to the Japanese archipelago. Baekje was once a great military power on the Korean Peninsula, most notably in the 4th century during the rule of Chunchogo when its influence extended across the sea to Liaoxi and Shandong in China, taking advantage of the weakened state of former Qin and Kyushu in the Japanese archipelago. However, Baekje was critically defeated by Gwanggyo the Great and declined. In 660, Emperor Gojoseon sent a Tang army towards Baekje to further relieve Silla. The Tang fleet sailed across the Yellow Sea, towards Chim River, and landed its army on the western coastline of Baekje. Crown Prince Kim Beekman, General Kim Yusing were dispatched with the Silla army and set off westwards into the Battle of Hwangsanbeol. General Jai Baek could only muster a force of about 5,000 Baekje troops in defense against the advancing Silla army. At Hwangsan Plain, the Silla army defeated the Baekje forces of General Jai Baek. In 660, the Baekje fell to the forces of Tang and Silla.
Silla.
Silla was the oldest of the four kingdoms of Korea. It is believed to have been the last kingdom to develop. By the 2nd century, Silla existed as a large state in the southeast, occupying and influencing its neighboring city-states. In 562, Silla annexed the Gaya Confederacy, which was located between Baekje and Silla. The four kingdoms of Korea often warred with each other, and Silla was often dominated by Baekje and Goguryeo. But it used cunning diplomatic means to make opportunistic pacts and alliances with the more powerful Korean kingdoms, and eventually Tang China, to its great advantage. In 660, Silla General Kim Yushin, aided by Tang forces, conquered Baekje after defeating General Jia at the Battle of Hwangsanbial. King Menmu, son of Muil and nephew of General Kim Yushin, launched another war in 667, and Goguryeo fell in the following year.
Gaya.
Gaya was an ancient Korean state that existed in the southern part of the Korean Peninsula, where the Nakdongang River existed. Gaya went through the stages of the 12 little states of Korea, the League of Small States, and the early ancient states. In the 1st century AD, the introduction of bronze-related bronze swords and early iron culture into the Nakdongang River basin established the cultural foundation of Gaya. Around the 2nd century AD, small countries began to appear in this area, and in the 3rd century, 12 changed small countries were established, and the Gyeonguk of Jimhae was the most developed cultural center. The early Gaya Federation collapsed in the late 4th and early 5th centuries, and in the mid-5th century, the late Gaya Federation centered on the Great Gaya state of Goryeo emerged. In the early 6th century, Gaya passed through most of northern Gaya to form an ancient state, but it was not possible to unify the entire Gaya region and was divided. Thus, the Goguryeo of Jimhae collapsed in 532 and the ancient Gaya state collapsed in 562. All other Gaya empires were merged into Silla. The material culture remains of Gaya culture mainly consist of burials and their contents of mortuary goods that have been excavated by archaeologists. Archaeologists interpret mounded burial cemeteries of the late 3rd and early 4th centuries such as Daesong-dong in Jimhae.
5-2. North-South Nations Period 1. Later Silla and Balhae.
Silla unified the three kingdoms in 676. Even though Silla unified most of the Korean Peninsula, most of the Goguryeo territories to the north of the Korean Peninsula were ruled by Balhae. At its height, Balhae's territories extended from southern Manchuria down to the northern Korean Peninsula. Balhae was called the Prosperous Country in the east.
Unified Silla.
Later Silla carried on the maritime prowess of Baekje, which acted like the Phoenicia of medieval East Asia, and during the 8th and 9th centuries dominated the seas of East Asia and the trade between China, Korea and Japan, most notably during the time of Jangbogo. Later Silla was a prosperous and wealthy country, and its metropolitan capital of Gyeongju was the 4th largest city in the world. Later Silla was a golden age of art and culture, as evidenced by the Hwangryongsa, Shiatgurum. Later Silla fell apart in the late 9th century, giving way to the tumultuous later Three Kingdoms period, 892 to 935.
Balhae.
30 years after the fall of Goguryeo, a Goguryeo general by the name of Daejeong founded the Korean state of Balhae and successfully expelled the Tang presence from much of the former Goguryeo territories. Balhae, 698 to 926, was a multi-ethnic kingdom in Manchuria, the Korean Peninsula and the Russian Far East. Balhae claimed to be a heavenly son and established his own era name. Diplomacy with Tang, Silla, and Japan was established during King Mu and King Munwang, and trade was prevalent through transportation routes, and the balance of power and stability in East Asia was achieved from the 8th to 9th centuries. After the political turmoil, it occupied Liudong in the mid-9th century and expanded its territory to the northeast. reorganizing the local system of 5 seigneuries, 15 divisions and 62 states, and reaching its peak. Balhae was established 30 years after the fall of Goguryeo in 668, and inherited Goguryeo's customs, and Balhae Wang also claimed to be the king of Goguryeo in a national document sent to Japan. The internationality of the Balhae Empire was well illustrated in the international relationships of the Dang, Khitan, and Japan, which are still meaningful today, and in its culture, it was influencing the party and Japan. Balhae was destroyed by the Khitans in 926. Goguryeo unified the later 3 kingdoms and received the last crown prince and much of the ruling class of Balhae, thus bringing about a unification of the 2 successor nations of Goguryeo. Balhae's collapse had a significant impact on the dynamics of East Asia, and King Taejo of Goguryeo recognized Balhae as a relative country.
523. North-South States Period 2. Goryeo Dynasty and Jin Dynasty. Goryeo Dynasty.
Goguryeo was founded in 918 and replaced Silla as the ruling dynasty of Korea. The name Goguryeo is a short form of Goguryeo, and was first used during the time of King Jangsu. Goguryeo regarded itself as the successor of Goguryeo, hence its name and efforts to recover the former territories of Goguryeo. Wang Jian, the founder of Goguryeo, was of Goguryeo descent and traced his ancestry to a noble Goguryeo clan. He made Keesong, his hometown, the capital. The king of Goguryeo was also called the emperor. In order to establish the stability of the imperial power and the central government system, King Gwangjong implemented the Novian Prosecutors Act and the past system, and strengthened the imperial power by eliminating meritorious subjects and family members. On Byakuran Island, the port of the capital's opening, he traded with merchants from the Song Dynasty, Japan, Arabia, and Persia. In the 12th century, conflicts over political power began to intensify within the ruling class of Goguryeo, leading to the Choi Chonghyun, Choi Woo-ui, Choi Hang, and Choi Ui-ui. Also, around this time, the refugees resisted the government throughout the country. However, after 30 years of invasion by the Mongol Empire in the 13th century, the nation's power began to decline. Following King Gongmin's failure to reform and internal and external troubles, Goguryeo entered the path of collapse. After Yi Seongjai's abdication of King Gongyang in 1392, Goguryeo was effectively destroyed. Later, Goguryeo officially collapsed when it was changed to Joseon in 1393.
Jin Dynasty. The descendants of Silla who founded Jin Dynasty. The Jurchen Jin Kingdom founded by Kim Hambo's descendants of the Silla dynasty. As we get into 1127, you have conquerors from the north, the Jin, who are able to conquer northern China. The Jin dynasty, known as the Great Jin, lasted from 1115 to 1234 in Chinese history, to predate the Mongol conquest of China. The Jin dynasty was created in modern Jilin and Heilongjiang by the Jurchen tribal chieftain Aduda in 1115. According to Jin history, Aduda was a descendant of Silla. In 1125, after the death of Aduda, the Jin dynasty broke and invaded Song dynasty North China. Following the fall of Beijing, the succeeding Southern Song dynasty continued to fight the Jin dynasty for over a decade, eventually signing the Jin dynasty in return for peace. The reason why the Jin dynasty was able to build such a powerful empire following the Liaoning dynasty was because most of the people who made up the Jin dynasty continued to come from Goguryeo. It was because their military organization centered on the people of Balhae. The military system of the Jin dynasty is in line with the 8th army of the Qing dynasty, which was called Hu Jin, as it was said to have succeeded the Jin dynasty. In Humjong Mani Wanrugo, both Notice and Daegomji are from Silla, and their family names are Wayman. Silla, along with Goguryeo, is said to have been linked to the old lands Soyosa and Jimsa. Do not distinguish the names of the two kings. Chong's historical book, Humjang Manyuwon Yudo, states that the origin of the Jin dynasty originated from Silla. The Mongol Shui, who lived as a vassal of the Jin dynasty, merged into the Mongols when a powerful leader named Genghis Khan emerged, eventually revolting against the kingdom in 1211. They won an overwhelming